What was the punchline to Ted's owl joke? Which character loses their cool in this episode? What does the word procrastinate really mean? Keep watching to find out. Welcome to Square Eyes, a channel where we recap, review, and take a sideways look at your favourite TV shows. This video will be taking a look at the 9th episode of the first season of Ted Lasso, called All Apologies. The Apple TV website summarises this episode by saying, after a series of mistakes on the pitch, pressure mounts to bench Roy. Rebecca finally reveals the truth to Ted, which tells you the main points, but not much more. My recap goes through the whole episode. Let's jump straight in. The episode opens with Roy Kent submerged in a wheelie bin ice bath in a darkened physio room. The only light coming from the TV, playing the sports news channel, which is talking about his poor performance in the game that has just finished. Not only that, they're saying he's not been good for a while. Ted comes in and tells him not to be so hard on himself, but his relentless chirpiness does little to lift Roy's mood. After the credits, Keely confronts Rebecca and tells her that she's got to tell Ted that it was her that arranged the paparazzi photographer to take pictures of Keely and Ted. Rebecca knows that she has to, but is struggling to work up the courage. In the press room, Ted faces a tricky question from Trent Krim about Roy Kent's recent dip in form. Ted concedes that Kent had a bad game, but sticks up for his captain and says that he's the backbone of the team. Nate and Beard are watching from the back of the room and are alarmed to hear Ted's defence of their fading star. Beard and Nate sit Ted down and tell him in no uncertain terms that Roy needs to be benched. His recent performances have been so bad that it's a risk to the team's survival in the Premier League. Ted takes on board their comments but disagrees and refuses to take Roy out of the team. Rebecca calls Ted into her office to tell him about what she's been doing, but then loses her nerve at the final moment. Instead, she loses her cool, waffles, and asks Ted to leave. Then Rupert turns up to tell her that he and Bex are expecting a baby. He pretends it's to stop Rebecca hearing about it in the papers, but really it's so he can enjoy seeing Rebecca's hurt in person. He really is the worst. The pain of talking to Rupert seems to bolster Rebecca though, and she goes into Ted's office and confesses everything to him about her sabotage of him, the photographer, the Trent Krim interview, and transferring away Jamie Tart. It's a good apology. She's honest about why she did it all, talks about how she's trying to hurt Rupert, and how other people were damaged along the way. She says sorry and means it. Ted looks hurt by the news, but he tells Rebecca that he forgives her. His recent experience of divorce has helped him to understand Rebecca's perspective. Ted and Roy then have a talk about his position in the team. Despite being an experienced professional and the captain of the team, Roy does not take it well when Ted floats the idea of him being taken out of the starting team and dropping to the bench. After quitting in the last episode, things have taken a bad turn for Higgins. He's grown an awful little beard and has started experimenting with jazz. Rebecca pays him a visit to apologise and asks him to come back to his old job and to mock him for his tiny beard. In between the sniggers, she shows genuine contrition, to which Higgins seems to respond to. Roy talks to Keely about his worries about dropping to the bench. It goes deeper than just one game and is more about the fading of his powers and accepting that his career is coming to a close. Keely then uses Roy's niece to show him that he's much more than just a footballer, and he doesn't need to worry about the end of his football career, as there's more to life than that. In the pub, the woman that Beard took as his date to the ball back in the For the Children episode is playing chess with another man, while Beard watches on from across the bar. Beard is trying not to let it bother him, but doesn't look to be doing a good job of it. Then Ted arrives at the pub and they talk about the team selection for the crucial upcoming game. Ted tells Beard that he's talked to Roy about his intention to bench him, but now he's doubting the decision because he knows what that will do to Roy's career and emotional well-being. Ted's words tip Coach Beard over the edge and we finally see some emotion from him. He raises his voice, bangs the table, and even his hat comes loose on his head. Among Beard's anger, he does talk some sense to Ted. He tells him they need to stop worrying so much about the feelings of the players they are coaching, as they aren't dealing with students anymore, and instead they need to think about the results, as the livelihoods of the team are on the line. Ted is completely gobsmacked by Beard's outburst, but it's not just him that's had an effect on. The woman at the other end of the bar has noticed too and is very impressed. She grabs him as he's walking out, and they leave together, with her telling him that what he did was one of the sexiest things she's ever seen. Roy goes to visit Ted at his flat and they talk over the prospect of him not starting. He's coming around to the idea now. Ted suggests that Roy could save face by saying he's injured and therefore not eligible to play in the game anyway. Higgins is back in Rebecca's office in the next scene. Clearly he accepted his old job back after Rebecca's apology. Ted celebrates the occasion by giving Higgins his own little box of biscuits, like the ones he makes for Rebecca. It's possible these ones were actually meant for Trent Krim's 3-year-old daughter's birthday, but Higgins takes them anyway. In the dressing room, Roy Kent's spot is empty, suggesting he's decided to pretend he's injured rather than have the embarrassment of being benched. Ted struggles to hide his disappointment as the rest of the players get themselves ready for the day's training. Then Roy turns up, apologising to the team for his lateness, brought on due to an issue with Keely and his niece that YouTube's prudishness makes it hard to describe. Regardless, Roy shows true leadership by accepting his place in the second 11 and showing his team spirit by trying his best regardless of his own disappointment. This is one of my favourite episodes of Ted Lasso. I think there's a lot to unpack in it about friendships, accountability, and how to say sorry. The title of the episode, taken from a Nirvana song, is about right as the whole episode is based around a series of apologies. The main one is Rebecca's apology to Ted after she sabotaged him so often in his time at Richmond. In fact, even his appointment was really an attempt to destroy the club, even though it didn't end up that way. Then there was Rebecca's apology to Higgins, where she showed remorse for how she had involved him in her childish scheme to destroy the club. I liked how Higgins seemed to be genuinely shocked to see this side of Rebecca, as she's used to seeing a more scheming and controlling side of her, but she came to his house and showed actual remorse, although she still teased him about his tiny beard. We also saw Ted's apology to Miss Shipley in the flat above for his late-night Carlton dance. I really liked the scene where Keeley pulled Rebecca into the boot room and told her to talk to Ted. I thought it highlighted an important part of friendship, holding one another to account. Keeley doesn't accept Rebecca avoiding the issue and insists that she talks to Ted, because she knows that Rebecca is a decent person and expects her to live up to that expectation. Being a good friend means supporting your friends when they need help, but it also means telling them when they're falling short too, which I think Keeley does here in a positive but firm way. I thought it was interesting that Ted was so quick to forgive Rebecca for her betrayal. He seemed upset when Rebecca confessed to him, but he seemed to recover from the news very quickly. Did Ted know all along, or did he at least suspect? He comes across as a bit of a clown at times, but this is a persona, and he's actually very smart, particularly when it comes to judging people and their motivations. It wouldn't surprise me if he'd already put together a lot of these pieces and suspected Rebecca was trying to undermine the team. It would explain why he's so quick to forgive Rebecca. The outburst from Coach Beard was quite shocking. After being so quiet and reserved all season, it meant we really paid attention when he raised his voice and spoke his feelings. He'd been letting Ted do his thing until now, but he's finally had enough of his touchy-feely approach and finally wants to focus on getting results. He's probably right too. Relegation will mean people lose their jobs and the club goes through terrible hardship, something fans of American sports don't typically experience because their sports don't have promotion and relegation usually. The storyline of Roy's fading ability is something that most people experience at some point in their lives. For most people it comes later in life as we approach old age and retirement and we find our place in the world less certain. But footballers' careers are usually over in their early 30s and they face this existential crisis early in life. To make matters worse, they have a long way to fall as they go from being cheered on every week by thousands of people when they're in their prime and then slowly slide into insignificance if they don't find another career after they stop playing. Roy can see his future coming up on him fast, and that's why he took the news of him being benched so hard. My favourite line in this episode was Roy Kent's when he said, "I never know how to react when a grown man does the Carlton in front of me," as Ted did a passable impression of Alphonse Ribeiro. Brett Goldstein delivers a line so deadpan as Jason Sudeikis dances away. It's a great comic moment. Rebecca, when she's been photographed for her Women in Football photo shoot, says there's only Karen, Delia and Posh Spice as well as her. The Karen she mentions is most likely Karen Brady, the current vice-chairman of West Ham and the former managing director of Birmingham City. She's also a member of the House of Lords, as well as being an aide to Alan Sugar on the UK version of The Apprentice. The Delia is Delia Smith, the famous cook who's also the joint majority shareholder of Norwich Football Club. She famously made a rallying cry to the fans on the pitch of one game when she'd had a few too many drinks. And of course Posh Spice is Victoria Beckham, whose only real tie to football is her husband Davy Beckham, who had a glittering playing career and now owns MLS team Inter Miami. On the training pitch, when Beard and Nate are ignoring him, Ted says he's made up a joke that starts, "What does a British owl say?" Now, obviously, we'll never know the punchline Ted had in mind, but I suspect it was probably, "To wit to whom," playing on the fact that English grammar has some peculiar quirks that Americans struggle with. Rebecca talks about the etymology of the word procrastinate. According to the trivia page of IMDb, it's from the Latin word pro, meaning to push forward, and crastinus, meaning belonging to tomorrow. So literally pushing something forward until it belongs to tomorrow. Coach Beard's girlfriend, Jane, is played by Phoebe Walsh, who is the story editor of the series and author of this episode. Ted says know thyself comes from Socrates, but the quote actually predates the philosopher. It has been found inscribed at the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, which dates to around 500 BC, and Socrates wasn't born until 50 years later. Now that Rebecca has confessed to Ted, it feels like a big bit of this season's story has now been resolved. However, the club still has a huge match against Manchester City, when they need to win to stay in the Premier League. Here are a few of the questions I hope we'll have answers to in the season finale. Will Richmond be able to beat Manchester City to retain their Premier League status? How will Jamie Tartt be involved in the final game? It seems too much of a coincidence that the last game is against his team. Will Roy Kent play a part in the final game, or will he sit it out? How will Beard and Ted be around each other after Beard's outburst in the pub? Thank you for watching my recap and review of the 9th episode of Season 1 of Ted Lasso. I'll be uploading my video for the season finale in the next few days. Please subscribe and turn on notifications to make sure you don't miss it. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Thank you. Goodbye.